Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the I don't know what number podcast, Virginia's for Conspiracy Lovers podcast. We are Sans Daniel. He's dead to me. Um, Illuminate confirmed. No, he's just far too busy with the kids these days. We tried to get to a place where he'd be able to make it on every episode. We just couldn't do it, so I said we couldn't wait any longer, and we're gonna come back. So we're back. Daniel will he'll join me here and there. I know we're doing a podcast. We're gonna be on Tinfoil Hat on April 8th, which we're pretty stoked about. So I'm gonna force him to be there since he's the smart one in the group. But I'm super stoked. Um, Tonight we've got somebody whose research I really, really dig, so much so that I didn't even realize I was listening to him for like 2 months on different people's shows, and then was on a podcast. We were on the Daily Dissidents podcast together, and I think I started quoting his research back to him, which was pretty awesome. But you guys are gonna dig him if you don't know him already. This is Tim Constantine of the I'm sorry, I got something. Tim, where are you from? I got a cord.
Six Sensory
Six
podcast.
Sensory Podcast. Sorry, my cord is all wrapped around my. All right,
You're
there we
good.
go. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Constantine of the Six Sensory Podcast, another fellow Southerner, not quite Virginia, but Tennessee. We're basically kissing cousins. So, as you know, everything we do here is Virginia-centric conspiracy, but like we always say, you know, uh, basically any conspiracy that you can dream of, you can find a thread that goes back to Virginia in some way. I haven't found one yet. So, without further ado, let's talk to Tim. Tim, what's going on, man?
What's up? Yeah, man, that's going back to Virginia. I mean, I'm thinking about what you're saying over here, and it's like if DC is the Rome of North America, all roads lead to Virginia,
Yeah,
DC,
yeah.
North American Rome. But yeah, my name is Tim Constantine. My show is Six Sensory Podcast. I spell it out SIX, and you can find me on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Also Patreon and Instagram, but the best place to find me is Spotify. And looking forward to talking with you, man.
Yeah,
All
dude,
this
I can't
stuff
wait.
does seem to all the conspiracies are just coming together in new ways.
Yeah, and like I think me and you talked about the last time we were on a podcast together is when you really break down every conspiracy, when you come at it from like the kind of worldview that I think we both come to it from, it all kind of goes back to the same thing. There's two forces in the world, and it seems like most of the conspiracies come from the not so great one.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and when you really break it down, it really is just tendrils from the one main conspiracy, in my opinion. The fallen angel kind
Right.
of saga, and then everything kind of bleeds off from there, and kind of pushes all the evil that we see now that we call conspiracy. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always chipping away at that one. Been looking lately into ancient symbols in America that's associated with the goddess. And what I'm
oh,
finding out about the goddess or the goddesses is that
yeah,
and this is something most scholars don't seem to want to talk about, but there appears to have been or to be a female Elohim.
oh wow,
So to broaden the fallen angel topic a little bit. I think you said I think there's a hierarchy here, and
yeah,
and fallen angels is in that category, but I also put Elohim in there, and we don't have to go into this big theological expose on this right now. I'm
yeah, no
just
worries.
just saying that
It's usually not what best when I get into this anyway, because I don't know my ass
yeah,
from a hole in the ground. I just,
but I have been looking at this stuff, which I think now's a good time to talk about it
Cool.
and the out how it relates to the female Elohim. Because if you go back and you look at okay, the Phoenician Semites, for instance,
right?
they talked about and carried these traditions of these female Elohim. And I think you could trace it back to Sumer and Babylon as you can with most things. And of course, some of the earliest writings that we know of, the Epic of Gilgamesh, it talks about Lilith and Ishtar in there.
Right.
Both names that I found in the Bible.
Right.
Isaiah in my Bible, my New Revised Standard Version, in Isaiah, Lilith is mentioned by name with a capital L. And then while she's not known as Ishtar Inanna in the Bible, she's called Astarte
Astarte.
Ashtoreth.
And
So,
that's who Solomon got bamboozled
yeah,
into to messing around with the worship of
right,
after one of his 5 million wives.
right.
Yeah, that's actually it's crazy synchronistic that you're talking about this specifically because my
We
research
didn't
is
we didn't plan on this either.
yeah, so my research recently, like literally within the last 2 weeks, has gone. I found a new thing. So you saw my ley line, you know the encode of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Williamsburg, and then it goes all the way to the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. It's kind of undeniable. There's no way that. So I've because my research kind of spreads out all over the place because it's kind of that central point in Williamsburg, and then you've got Bacon off to the back of it, and then you've got everything moving forward with the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry and the rest of the country because that's kind of the birthplace. Um, I've decided I've got this pyramid thing, and it's kind of undeniable. There's no way that this guy Francis Nicholson laid out those two roads specifically to make that obnoxious point, the two oldest roads in the country, and that they just happen they put the College of William and Mary on there, and that just so happens to be the exact encode of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And then not only that, if you follow it along its edge and then play that line all the way out to the end, it lands right on top of the Great Pyramid of Giza. So I got this one thing. So long story short, I'm like, all right, that's my touch point for my research where I know somebody laid that out like that on
Mm-hmm.
purpose. Like at least I know that. A lot of it's speculation. A lot of it on my end is confirmation bias. But I that's the one I took to the director of the historic campus at William and Mary about 5 or 6 years ago, and she was like, "Holy shit, yeah."
Yeah.
That's she was like, "That's something." But I started. There's a lot of space between Williamsburg, Virginia, and the pyramid, the Great
Sure.
Pyramid of Giza. So, and it goes through France, it goes through part of Greece, and so I just decided to start digging through and following that ley line through France. And I
Does
shit
it
you not, dude,
does it cut through Basque country by any chance?
it goes directly over top of the cave that supposedly Mary Magdalene,
Okay.
the whole Merovingian
Right.
line thing that she had pregnant with Jesus's kids, supposedly. She escapes the Holy Land and coming through, like, takes some trip. She goes up through Spain and ends up in France and then lives as a hermit for 30 years in this cave where she, like, um, kind of preaches. People come and see her in secret. And it's a really big, like, monument. It's like the Mario Saint. I don't know. It's got some big French name, but it is like
That's
one of their
interesting.
on their like Mary like kind of pilgrimage sites.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the middle of nowhere. On a mountain in the middle of a forest, and it's this cave. It's like the grotto of the Magdalene or something like that. Something Baum. Um, but sorry, but I've always assumed that knowing that the people that I'm looking at, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry and basically the Stuart bloodline, following them all the way back to the Merovingians, and then following the Merovingians back, and they go through these tribes that came into France early on around, you know, first centuries first couple of centuries. Um,
Like
and,
Cathars.
yeah, and then they no, the Cathars were later. They're up near the like right
I
before the
should say,
Crusades.
right.
This
I
is
should say
like
be they maybe they became the Albigensian Cathars later, right?
yeah, well, and they it's all these early Frankish tribes that if you follow those tribes back, you can see where they come from, and they go all the way back into the Levant, into
Yeah,
these
right.
Canaanite tribes. And sorry, and I'm going to let you go, but
No, you're good, bro.
one of the biggest principles of all those tribes going from the early Canaanites all the way up through the Gnostics and stuff is this idea of the divine feminine and the queen of heaven. And so you have Isis, Ishtar, Astarte, and then once it and then to hide it, so this grotto that my ley line goes right across, um where supposedly Mary Magdalene used to hide was a polytheistic, like a pagan site before that, where they would go and worship this goddess.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a site of goddess worship before. Then they adopt this um Mary Magdalene thing to it. And
Right.
it's just more
So
of this goddess worship that is hidden within whatever the safe religion or culture of that area and time is. And it comes all the way up into America, and we've got the goddess worship of Columbia, Virginia, all that.
mhm.
Anyway, now I'm gonna shut up for a
It
second.
certainly made its way over here. Here's something I was reading earlier, and I'm going to read it out. And this person presents some research here, and they sort of put their opinion on it as well. I'm just throwing it out there that this is not necessarily my hard and fast opinion, but it says that Astarte is also a Syrian moon goddess representing the productive power of nature. More than likely, she was this basically the same cultural figure as Fatima, which maybe I can get into later, who
Hmm.
changed names from time to time and from place to place. They're saying that Fatima and Astarte may be the same goddess, which is really big for my research, but I'll come back to that.
Okay.
Um, changed names like most other ancient moon goddess figures, but it's probably the same goddess. The and this is this person's opinion coming up here, I think, but the Blessed Virgin Mary's transformation from the ancient figure of Astarte into the modern role of a Christian goddess has already been well established in other theological texts and in other Order of Divine Mother lessons. What you were saying there brought that to mind, so I figured, hey, I'll pull it up and read it.
Yeah, yeah.
But you see what they're saying there, and we don't necessarily need to get down that tangent of but this person is linking a lot of that Mary stuff that you're talking about directly to Astarte.
Right.
And we've talked about this before, but this is just a new sort of a new
Yeah,
glance
yeah.
at that. And you were talking about ley lines being over here. I'll tell you, I think that those things, ley lines, whatever we want to call them,
Yeah.
these lines,
Somebody plotted one point to another and made sure
right,
that it told a story by crossing
tells
through
a,
certain areas and places.
it,
And I think that's how they navigated to where they wanted to be. And it was kind of a way to hang on to their kind of heritage or their background or
mm,
wherever they're coming from.
it tells a
Just
story. Like you
just
said.
like the Freemasons who laid down, William and Mary in the shape of the exact encode of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It may not be for them right then, it's for later on,
Yeah.
adepts.
So,
Yeah.
so what I was going to say is, I think that those crisscross the countryside over here.
Yeah.
There's one that goes from the Newport Tower
Right.
to the Kensington Runestone.
Right.
And I've been told that that connects through Cahokia as well, which is I
Yeah.
still need to
The
confirm that,
mounds.
but if that's true, that's pretty big because what you had was Cistercian monks who camped out on top of the Cahokia on top of one of the platform mounds there for a while in
Really?
the 1800s, I think. And what I'm finding now is that the Cistercian monks was like a brother clan to the Templars.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what that is a Templar line of some sort.
Right.
They were intentionally mapping it out and placing things on that line, and maybe they had enough foresight to cross it with Cahokia. And what's interesting about this, getting into some of the stuff I've been looking into, is the egg symbolism. I don't know if I told
Right.
you that part yet, but I've been looking into egg symbolism, which is a symbol closely related to Astarte and Venus and this great goddess. But what's crazy about it as it pertains to the Newport Tower is that every once a year at 9 a.m. on the one of the solstices, uh, there's a hole in the Newport Tower where
Yeah.
light shines through. It's it was planned out purposefully to do that, and the light shines onto an egg. So
Right.
so I keep looking at this egg stuff, and it's like the I think the best example thus far that I've come across is of an egg in the ancient world is actually here in America,
Yeah.
in Ohio to be
Yeah. The
exact. Where
Serpent Mountains, right?
yes, you already know where I'm going. So
Yeah.
you have you have this egg in the mouth of the serpent at Serpent Mouth, and at one point, now this is where it gets interesting, right? At one point, there was a standing stone or an obelisk that was in the egg.
Oh, really?
Yes. So they moved it. Somebody pushed it over and rolled it down a hill. It's still down there on the side of the hill from what I'm told. But what was happening was it was getting struck by lightning all the time. So
No kidding.
some of the settlers, some of the Westerners who came over got rid of it. I think that that was also purposeful, and I think it was meant to charge the egg, perhaps symbolically, perhaps
Right.
metaphysically, maybe something a little bit more than just symbolism was happening there, but it was meant to charge the egg. And why charge the egg and not the snake, right? Why show the connection that the connection to the heavens was through the egg and not the snake?
Right. Right.
That's telling us that that egg is directly connected to the sky, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And long story short, the egg is associated. What I'm finding is it's associated with crafts, like
Right.
weird old ancient alien spacecrafts and well, sky beings, right? If you go back to
Yeah.
Uruk and the legend of Ishtar and Anna in Uruk during Gilgamesh's reign, she was said to have come down and tried and prodded him and tried to get him to go up and fly the skies of Earth with her. And he wouldn't do it. He's like, no, all the guys that go up with you never return. So you see this, there's this long standing relationship between the sky goddesses and like crafts and just goddesses and flying the skies of Earth. So and the eggs in there somewhere, it's just there to be decoded, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
I just think it's funny that it all ties back in with ancient America.
It always seems to. I never wanted to be the you know, Florida is the Garden of Eden or like mud flood or you know, these buildings were here for 1,000 years before we. I never wanted to be that guy, but the more and more I look into this stuff, the more it doesn't seem like the more I'm just getting the impression that America wasn't just this unknown piece of land on the other side of the ocean from all of civilization where people were just, rubbing sticks together and making fire. Like it
Yeah.
really, there's too much that points to here. And I mean, it just seems like it was this forever dash of the people in the most know, the people who had the most knowledge, esoteric or otherwise, were always there's some legend of those peoples, the Phoenicians, the Templars, the Vikings, all these people who had balls and knowledge we're constantly trying to get over here. And I just can't
Hmm.
believe that, obviously. I don't think any of us believe 1492 anymore, but
No, no, the Vikings were here way before that, and I
Mhm.
continue to find letters and other indications. It's interesting because the what I'm finding is that Jefferson and Washington and some of the founding fathers knew
Mhm.
about all this.
Oh yeah. I mean
I don't know
Jefferson,
why they decided to leave it out of the history books. I haven't gotten there yet, but yeah, to your point, there was a lot going on over here, and I'm constantly tying this stuff back to the Middle East to be exact. All over
yeah,
the place elsewhere too,
yeah,
but a high concentration of this stuff that I'm finding over here goes directly back to the Middle East, and I think with the egg to hang out on that a little bit longer, that's the ancient goddess Venus. Uh, she comes out of the egg. And speaking of the Phoenician Semites, they had a huge presence in Syria. And so if you look at the Syrian myth of this, Venus breaks from the egg. She comes down, the egg, well, an egg comes down from the sky, lands by the Euphrates. She breaks from the egg, symbolizing
right.
breaking into a new era, okay? Or maybe a golden age, right? And maybe that's maybe there's something going on with that too because there's that egg trope alongside of divine feminine in the USA right now. I can maybe get back to that later, but like, are we breaking into a new era? And that's why you've got this egg symbolism popping off in the ufology movement. All these guys like Jake Barber and all that saying that they're seeing the egg, and not only just seeing an egg,
Yeah.
but getting downloads or channeled information in the form of like a female essence that's coming and talking to
Yeah.
them.
Is that Ryan Bledsoe, the guy with the have you heard his story?
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah, so
his.
you know the Bledsoes with the this
Right.
like female goddess alien chick who's
Yeah.
also a Christian. I don't it's hard to
Yeah.
follow. But yeah, there seems to be more of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Less little gray men with big eyes and a lot more of these like kind of divine presences or
Hmm.
supposed divine presences coming.
Yeah. But I mean, to put a bow on it, I just think that in particular, that Syrian creation, or yeah, the creation myth of the original story of Venus to the Syrians and how she comes to the egg. I mean, just so much stuff is going back to that myth alone for me. And yeah, it's Jake Barber is one of the ones who's seeing the egg. So you get the Bledsoes. Chris Bledsoe is seeing the lady,
Mhm.
female
Sorry, I didn't mean to take you
goddess.
off the egg there for a second, but yeah.
No, this is no. I mean, actually, this kind of all works in because, um, so yeah, so it's he's seeing the lady. I'm trying to remember what he calls her. I think he said she was Hathor. She said her name was Hathor.
Okay.
And that fits into, and I've also heard Ryan say Fatima before as
Okay.
well.
I think
So
Hathor brings you back to Egypt too, right? And that Hathor
yeah.
is a Egyptian goddess,
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah, this fits in with the Inanna Ishtar stuff pretty good. But yeah, Jake, here's the thing though with the modern UFO movement and the goddess thing. This is what is blowing my mind right now. Barber has his egg sightings in the desert in California,
Right.
from what I could tell, because I listened to his account recently. And of course, there's all this stuff in his story about it being an egg. So I'm looking at the connections. And what stood out to me though is that it was in the desert, California, where he had this happen to him. So I was like,
Yeah.
that's interesting because you, if you look at, okay, Jack Parsons,
Parsons and Crowley, well, not together, but Parsons using Crowley's
Crowley,
magic to
right,
doing
right,
sex magic out in the desert with what's her name? Audrey Hepburn, or not Audrey Hepburn, but
yeah. Well, Parsons
Marjorie
was
Marjorie
Marjorie
Taylor. Nope.
Taylor.
No, she's a politician. Not Marjorie Taylor
Marjorie
Greene.
Cameron.
Marjorie Cameron, there it is. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
so
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
he's in. I've done that before on shows, bro. I've completely put those two people together, just merged them together. But the yeah, and I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, Parsons was doing Crowley magic out in the desert in California in 46 and 47 for the Babylon working. And I kept seeing all these threads go back to that same desert.
Yeah.
Um, Crowley's Alam or
Alamantra,
Amalantrah working.
Alamantra working.
Alamantrah working. That was
Yeah.
also done in America. That was done in New York. And what's interesting about that is that it was what comes out of that working is a
Mm.
phrase that they wrote down. And the phrase was, "It's all in the egg."
Really?
Yeah. So the whole thing with Parsons and Crowley and the magic that they're doing in America,
Yeah.
right? The whole thing is it's about opening portals.
It's all egg centered.
It's about channeling. It's about that female essence. And with Alamantra, he did that with Roddy Minor, this
Okay.
chick that he had help him with that ritual. And the whole thing was that it was a magical experiment intended to open up a portal for extra dimensional, extraterrestrial beings. And the phrase they get is, "It's all in the egg." And
Wow.
you fast forward now to current era, and this guy's talking about these eggs coming in from another realm and it
Yeah.
being female, and it's like there's just a lot to this, and I'm still trying to put it all together and figure out how I'm going to present
Yeah.
it to the audience to where it makes sense and sort of a better order and all that. But these workings by occultists in America brought what they brought in and what they saw and what they documented correlates with the modern UFO phenomenon in ways beyond coincidental. And it's I think there's something to that breaking the egg and it being symbolic of breaking us into a new generation. And I think that that one probably ties more back in with the Babylon working, which, by the way, Parsons said that he was talking to the goddess Babylon during that.
Right.
And there's a book called The Red Goddess. I think Peter Gray is the author, where they go back and they look at the goddess Babylon and they trace her origins back to Ishtar and Nana. So this is
Right.
all that same goddess. So there's no,
Yeah.
there's not a coincidence
It's the
that all
same
this.
chick, and then that gets morphed into Athena and elements of her into Athena and other Roman and Greek goddesses. I mean, this is exact the goddess worship thing. Once I found it's called the Cave of Saint Balm, located in the province of located in the Provence region. This is the traditional sanctuary where Mary Magdalene lived as a hermit for the Merovingian Stuart. Oh no, this is part of my other research for the Merovingian Stuart tradition. This is the Grail Cave, representing the preservation of the sacred bloodline. But like I said, this was previously a pagan site where there was goddess worship, and
Mhm,
you just follow all these back. It's the same. The storm god, the storm goddess of the early Frankish pagan tribes, which is kind of what is connected to mine, has the exact same characteristics of Ishtar and Isis. You've got the Phoenicians that make their way at some point through Egypt, and it goes from Ishtar and Astarte into Isis. You know, if you just follow like the timeline back, you just see the same goddess worship, and it just changes names. But the
mhm,
characteristics, the symbolism and the characteristics only change like ever so slightly, and all the way up to modern day. And I
mhm,
think, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which is the kind of the modern um the modern you know pusher of that kind of symbolism and esoteric thought. Um, I mean, they trace the Scottish rite of Freemasonry, at least, traces its lineage back to the uh, early 1600s or I'm sorry, maybe mid 1700s
Yeah,
in
there's some
France. Once
there's
it split after the 1717 coming out party in England, then there was the whole Jacobite Catholic versus Protestant split. The
so
final,
it's Templars in 1100.
yeah,
It's Rosicrucians in the early 1600s, and then
yeah,
it's the Masons in the 1700s.
yeah.
That's
And I think you've got most of it being kind of harbored within France and in Scotland during that period between the Templars and the Rosicrucians and the Masons. So you're talking like, you know, late 1300s, 1400s, early 1500s. That's where a lot of this stuff is like kind of settling in and getting, pushed out towards into Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. It's really it just kind of stalls out in Scotland and France, both
yeah,
of the places where, Templars
Rosslyn
went and
Chapel.
yeah, Templars went and hidden in Scotland.
Hmm.
Templars came from France
Right.
originally. That's where that's where I think a lot of the knowledge that the Templars, I think they
It's
already,
no coincidence that you've got the 1100s Templars, the 1700s, early 1600s Rosicrucians, and then 1700s Freemasons. It's not a coincidence that they're the youngest child of all three,
yeah,
right? They're
yeah.
taking heavily from their older brothers, the Rosicrucians and the Templars. They're drawing heavily, and I could show you. I'd have to go back in all my research and pull out all the evidence so I could like really, really, hammer the nail in good. But
Yeah.
I
Well,
keep
I've got
finding
exactly what you're talking about now.
people are saying that there's a lot of people throughout history who were close to the mystery schools who were initiates themselves who say, yeah, and the Masons formed out of the Templars and Templarism.
Yeah, well, I mean, so that's I got into this whole conspiracy thing by, you
Oh,
know,
and one more thing.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
The Masons have, since you brought them up, the Masons have that widow, just
Yeah.
to tie that
That
in with the goddess thread. They have
yep.
a goddess element to what they do too, but it's reserved for higher level Masons. You got to get past like Blue Lodge to get into that, I think.
Yeah, I'll never be able
And
to
I'm
find
sorry,
it.
sorry, I
No,
just
no,
maybe
no,
I
no.
jumped in there on you.
No, I'm flicking through some of my recent kind of
You were
notes and whatnot.
you,
Um
you you were saying something about what got you into this, and
oh,
I
and it
jumped in.
was Masonry and Templars, the whole thing.
Mhm.
That kind of like romanticized view of this like secret, I'm sure it was the Da Vinci Code, one of the first books I think I read that wasn't required by, school to read,
Yeah.
um and I think there's a pretty good basis for at least getting you familiar with the terminology. You got to really read between the lines. A lot of it's crap, but a lot of it, I mean, the vernacular is there. It obviously it leans heavily on the kind of Gnostic side and um, this kind of a assumed truth of the divine feminine. Um, but yeah, that connection between, the Templars and the Masons, that, a lot of people look at it and they go, it's just a story that the Masons tell to kind of imbue their order with importance. Um, there's a pretty good argument to be made when you look at the peasants' revolt in the 1370s in England. I believe it was so the Templars hadn't been they hadn't been off the scene for very long, and then there was this big peasants' revolt in England that all kicked off at the same time, all over England. Like it was a coordinated attack where they just went through and the peasants just kind of rose up and they tore through all these towns and cities kind of all at the same time on the same day without being, within earshot of one another. All wearing the same color cowl, which was like a hood without a shirt, but they all like, the kind of the Robin Hood hood. It just like kind of goes over your shoulders. But that was like a one interesting thing is that they all wore the same color. All these peasants just went out like hoods up, terrorizing the town. But the really interesting part is when they went through all these towns and cities, including London, they went into the large cathedrals and killed priests and burned down cathedrals and stuff like that. Now they would skip over the smaller like parish churches, like the smaller chapels and stuff in town, but they would get to these big cathedrals. And turns out when they go back and look at history and all the places that got burnt down and the priests and bishops and things like that who were killed during this revolt, they were all properties and people of the Knights Hospitaller. And that was the order that was given all of the Templars' stuff when they outlawed the Templars. So they outlaw the Templars, and they make the claim that they're heretics, and to round them up in 1307. I think they're finally suppressed in by like 1312. But
They
after
left.
yeah,
They
but
they took 16 ships and left for Shell Harbor and got
f-
out of there. I mean,
for sure.
they killed some of them, but the rest of them
Yeah, I
came.
mean, they killed some guys, but after they were gone and they were underground, you had all I mean, the Knights Templar were the largest land and property holders in the world at that time. In
Yeah.
the quote unquote Christian world. Well, the Catholic Church gave all their stuff, all their places, all their preceptories and castles and fortifications and chapels and cathedrals. They gave all that stuff to a new order. It wasn't a new order. It was another Crusader order called the Knights
Right.
Hospitaller.
Right.
And when you go back and look at the Peasants' Revolt of like I think it's the 1370s, it's pretty clear that the entirety of England peasantry just got up one day in this weird coordinated attack and just murked all the people who were in the old Templar buildings, like
Hmm.
Retribution. And so there's a really good book. It's old. It's like from the 70s. I've got it up there. It's called Born in Blood, I think. Yeah, Born in Blood.
Okay.
And it's a non-Mason who goes through and he digs all that out and kind of shows because you do have like you've got the Masons claiming their descendancy from the Templars, but you have this big chunk of time from 1717, the official coming out of the Masons, and the 1307, the outlawing of the Masons.
So it was my Andrew Michael Ramsey. I looked it up. He was one of the Templars who came out and said that they produced and created Freemasonry straight out of the Templars. He was talking about this in the 1700s. Or
Yeah.
he said that happened. That's what happened in the 1700s, and he was very candid about it. Michael Andrew Ramsey. There's others that have said this, but
Where
he's
do you know where Ramsey was? Oh, Ramsey. Holy shit, dude.
so
Um,
there was. But here's the deal with the Mason stuff. There was a Masonic builder tradition
right.
that goes way back
Yeah, the
that
guilds
was
go way.
harbored by groups like the Templars. So the Masonic building traditions are way older than the 1700s,
Oh yeah.
and the Templars tapped into those in with Bernard de Clairvaux in the 1100s. That's that marriage, if you will, the teaming up of Templars and Cistercians. They were doing that and teaming up to build the Gothic cathedrals, and they were utilizing these old Masonic building traditions that who knows they go back to the Solomon's Temple, and some of them they might go back
Yeah,
to
here you go.
Tubal Cain even. But that was and the Tyrannesians. There's the Cistercian monks, the Tyrannesian monks, all
Yeah,
worked with the Templars, and they sort of swapped secrets and
yeah.
initiated
And
each other and all that.
and that was actually when they got outlawed, that was a rule. Like, so in Scotland, they had just broke with the Vatican around that time. Like they were having a spat. The staunch Catholics in Scotland were, in a fight with the Vatican at that
Yeah.
time. So that's one of the logical reasons as to why the Templars could go and find refuge there. But like in France and I think Spain and a few other places, the government did what the Pope said and rounded up all the
Oh
Templars
yeah,
they could
they
find.
rounded some of them up.
But in
They were able to catch
England,
them.
England and Ireland and Scotland in particular, um, they didn't. They
Well,
just kind of
so
they round.
they were able to go seek refuge in Scotland.
Well, yeah, because there was a split between Scotland and the Pope at the time. But in
Yeah.
England, they didn't have that split. But still in England, there was a strange thing where they just kind of ignored it. And what they did in England, they allowed outlawed Templars to come to England, and then they would allow them to enter into some of these other orders, the Cistercian order. Like you could seek like recompense by okay, you're not a Templar anymore, but you have to continue to hold on to your vow of poverty and go into one of these other monk orders. And it was a way for you're right there in Scotland and in England. I'm sure the network was a little tighter than it was
The
out.
the Templars also to just so we're not straying too far from a lot of the stuff I said early on. It's just to tie it in. The Templars
Hmm.
venerated the goddess. That
Hmm.
is the center, from what I can tell, that's the center point of their belief system is the goddess. And some of, yeah, the Templars, Philip the Fair, I think, is the one who called down the order and they split. They were able to capture
Hmm.
Templars. They were not able to capture all the Templars. It went underground. Some of them went to Scotland and hid out. Some of them said, no, that's too close. We got to get further away. And they came over here and they
Hmm.
brought the goddess tradition with them over here to the Americas at the time.
Hmm.
But I think it's the guys who went to Scotland to seek refuge. I think that's how you get a Rosalind Chapel, and that's how you get Freemasonry out of. Didn't Freemasonry comes out of Scotland, right?
Um, well,
In
so check
part,
this. So yeah, in part. So
the
check this out.
Scottish part, yeah.
I know some of the earliest records that we have are from um, the
But
Edinburgh
that,
Lodge.
but don't you
Yeah.
see? Like,
I mean, they say that
this is what's
Freemasonry
happened.
didn't. Yeah, they
This has
say
got
that.
to be what happened, right? The
Yeah.
Templars. It's this Templar split that made all this. It set all this in motion in the
Well,
first
and they're
place.
pissed. And they're pissed. Whether or not they were real heretics or they just owed or King
But
Philip.
I'm saying, I think we stumbled upon a very, very true origin story for the Freemasons here. I
Yeah,
think,
well, check this out. So the guy that you were talking about, I just was doing this research half an hour before we got on here together. The Egyptian Rite, the Stuarts. So my theory is that America is a breakaway civilization for the Stuart bloodline that traces their bloodline back to the Merovingians and obviously through the Stuarts were who was in power in Scotland when the Templars came over. I mean, you're talking about Robert the Bruce, and then the Stuarts go all the way up into the early 1700s as kings of England. But the Egyptian rite, the Stuarts were patrons of the rite of perfection, which later evolved into the Scottish rite. These degrees often cited Egypt as the source of Adoniramite masonry. Adoniramite mason. Anyway, so this is them way back in the day, kind of tracing their Masonic heritage all the way back to Egypt in this Adoran whatever.
Well, so there's a couple of these orders like that. The
Mm,
Druze is another one,
mm,
and you also have a lot of books that emerge from Turkey
hmm
about Turkish Freemasonry. We're going back to this Middle Eastern
yeah.
layer to this, and what again that was a lot in part due to the Templars who mixed with these other groups. They
And
were
then
hanging
here,
out with the Druze
and
and
then
some
here
of
you
these other
go.
groups.
This interest wasn't just aesthetic, it was based on the belief that the Templars had rediscovered Hermetic secrets in
Yeah.
the Levant, knowledge of sacred science originally held by Egyptian priests.
Yep.
The royal secret, leading Jacobite thinkers. So, Jacobite thinkers, I was about to ask you this Ramsey guy, where's he from? Leading Jacobite thinkers such as Andrew Michael Ramsey, Chancellor of the Grand Lodge of France. So this is in the 1740s, I believe.
Yeah.
But Scottish Jacobite, and for the people out there who don't know, the Jacobites were the guys who supported the Stuart line. At this point in the 1740s, the Stuarts were done. And Bonnie Prince Charlie is like hiding out in France. So France always protected Scotland, Catholic countries, Catholic country. And so this Scottish Freemason is the Chancellor of the Grand Lodge of France, who argued that the Templars went to the Holy Land to recover the lost architecture of Solomon, which they believed was a refined version of the Egyptian pyramidal geometry. And
Hmm.
that kind of part right there it goes into my research with the ley lines and how the geometry is laid out in Williamsburg. But the connection there to Solomon is oh man.
Okay, real quick. Now that
Go ahead.
we've
Yep.
established this timeline here. I've got some notes here. I just want to add this because I think this is happening around the same
Oh,
time.
here we go.
It's Roslin Chapel in Scotland was built by Sinclair.
Hmm.
Sinclair was partly responsible for the Oak Island treasure, but what he was doing in Scotland was he was hiding all this stuff in part from the Roman Catholic Church. And also the English were warring with the Scots, so he was hiding it from, from potential pillage from the English too, I
Hmm.
believe. But the secret tunnels under Rosslyn Chapel were built to house and hide all this treasure that you're talking about that they may have gotten from Jerusalem from Solomon's temple. And the Templars combined forces with these monks, and it was like a big old secret society barbecue, and they got together and they built these tunnels. And what Sinclair did was he sat down the monks and said, some of whom were not proper Templars yet, they hadn't been initiated yet, so he said, we're going to swear you in under a secret oath. And that was one of the first early forms of Freemasonry, was
Hmm.
setting aside or coming up with a separate from Templar set of oaths to bring these monks in to debrief them, if you will. So
Yeah.
the true nature of the chapel is wrapped up in all this stuff,
Yeah,
right?
it's
And
first lodge, first
yeah,
lodge
there you
room.
go. There you
So
go.
check this out. Again, stuff I was researching just before we got on here. The alignment of the divine feminine. Now, this is funny that it is very specific to my personal research, but wait till you hear all the points it hits, right?
Hmm.
Um, Giza, the origin, represents the mother of the world. The pyramid slope angle of 51 by 51 or something like that is often linked to the angle of the mother in the Hermetic tradition. The Saint Baume, the cave in France that the line goes over, is the preservation. This cave in France is the traditional site where Mary Magdalene, the apostle to the apostles, was said to have carried the bloodline. It acts as a midpoint of the ley line, representing the hidden or underground phase of the tradition. And then in Williamsburg, the manifestation located in Virginia, named for the Virgin Queen. The town's layout, blah, blah, blah. The naming of the burg suggests Stuart Merovingian lineage traced by some to the Sidonian Queen of Heaven. Worshippers sought to manifest ancestral power Templar heritage. The Stuarts claimed protection of the Order of the Temple after its suppression. The Templars were believed to have recovered Egyptian architectural secrets, blah, blah, blah. The Egyptian
All
right.
right. So
Yeah. So,
I'll throw you one in real quick. It fits into what we're talking about here. I think the Templar literature, some of the Templar literature I've seen, states that they put 8 vaults over here in North America.
I've
Okay,
heard
okay,
Hogan talk
but
about that.
right, right. So
Yeah.
then, yeah, you'll hear these guys allude to it. Here's the deal. I think that some of those vaults were put in after this split here, where these guys got in ships and
Oh
left
yeah.
Europe. Sinclair was a part of that, but they had this ties in with ley lines and everything else we're
Mhm.
talking about because they used a ley line to put the 8 vaults on in the first place.
Yeah.
But the 8 is symbolic of the goddess.
Oh,
Eight
really?
8 pointed star, the 8 pointed star of Ishtar. That's the whole reason why they did that.
Right.
And just again, that Newport Tower is on one of these ley lines. That's
Yeah.
got goddess symbolism in it, or enveloped with the, or it shows up on the solstice. I gotta find that date here in a minute, like exactly when the beam of light comes through. But
Well, and when you look at uh so there is a
one more thing though
yeah, go ahead.
to do with this. Sorry, I meant to throw this in, but this is referenced not only by modern day Templars, because I think Hogan probably has said something about this, but also we see this in old letters from the big Mason, Albert Pike.
Ike.
He
Yeah.
he talks about this. He talks about how they were over here
Yeah.
looking for ley lines and looking for places to put vaults, essentially. And he says these were our Templar brothers who coveted the goddess.
Right.
In
Yeah.
and that's he's alluding to the fact that they were very much a goddess cult.
Yeah.
Okay, looking for ley lines. And he goes on in that letter to talk about how it was that expedition they did would go on to influence Brigham Young as to
Yeah.
where he put
Yeah.
some of his Mormon temples because they called it the Great Western Meridian or something that they found.
Hmm.
They were mapping out ley lines
Yeah. I
and
believe it.
worshiping the goddess
Well, like I said,
in America.
when you look so I think two places for sure in North America that I know of that touch my research directly is there's of course the vault legend in Williamsburg, Virginia, underneath
Okay.
the Bruton Chapel. That was actually found by discovered or theorized by Manly P. Hall's wife, the
Right.
most prolific Masonic
I
writer.
really want to do something on that one day, but
on,
continue.
on what, the vault or Manly P. Hall?
Both the vault
Man,
and the
well, I
lens that she was viewing it through, why she was interested in it in the first place,
yeah.
all that.
So we'll have to do one because I mean that's you can spit on that churchyard. I've stood in that churchyard. I've looked at the tombstones that are exact replicas from the 1500s book Wither's Book of Emblems, who that book is dedicated to the same people that the first folio of Shakespeare is dedicated to. And you've got Wither's Book of Emblems is this it's a bibliomancy book. So it's just this weird book of emblems and like limericks. And they're weird. They all look like it's it's hundreds of pages and every page is an illustration and each illustration kind of looks like a tarot card. And then
Hmm.
there's the guy who wrote it, uh Withers, I can't remember his first name. He writes this short poetry that makes no sense that goes with each one. And what it was is it was during a time in the 1500s, maybe late 1500s, early 1600s, Bacon days, Shakespeare days, where John Dee days,
Oh
where
yeah.
they would practice this thing called bibliomancy, where you would open a book, touch a page, and then that would divine what was going to happen. You would ask a question. This was a book of these very strange, a skeleton holding a hourglass, standing on a globe. with some random like words about memento mori under it. But there's like monuments. Some of the pages have these stone monuments in it, and they're weird. And in Williamsburg, in that churchyard, there is several of them that match these emblems, but one of them in particular is this very tall uh, animal-footed obelisk, okay?
Hmm.
And it is the tombstone or memorial for a woman named Elizabeth Bray. And on it, it says that Elizabeth Bray and her husband both died at the age of 32 from wasting disease. Well, she lived into her like 60s or 70s, so she didn't die at the age of 32.
Okay.
And so it matches this Withers book of emblems. And so these are some of the I mean that churchyard is filled with epitaphs and tombstones that match and can be decoded. You've got epitaphs where random letters in the epitaph are capitalized. And Marie Bauer Hall, she decoded some of that, which pointed to Shakespeare, which pointed to this, you know.
Okay. So
Um,
real quick
mhm,
on the stone monuments, right?
mhm,
Before we get off, okay. First of all, the obelisk I was talking about in the egg at Serpent Mound. That's
yeah,
one. This area, another one. This area that the Templars were looking at out west, where Brigham Young he used their research to put. They left what's called the New Mexico Templar stones out there. Those are little standing stones, right?
okay,
But beyond that, what was happening over here, and I got it pulled up right here. I'll show you in a second. But the settlers, when they got here after Columbus, now at this point, they were
hmm,
finding that the landscape was marked with obelisks and stone markers all over the country. They were all over the East Coast, man. And I
really,
have, yeah, and I have an account of that here. It's this is from I think this is in Pennsylvania. Yeah, it says there were markers were discovered, one standing near the old site of Frankstown and the other just beyond Huntington, marking the proper fork. You know, they were putting these at the forks in the river.
right,
They had stuff written all over them. Some of it was probably directional, some of it who knows what it was all about, but um, divinatory maybe even. But Hunt, the one in Huntington stands today on a site in which in Revolutionary War times was known as Standing Stone. So they named the place
mm,
after it. Here at this spot, an ancient stone marker once towered on a promontory. Amazed explorers described the stone as an obelisk 14 feet high, broad of base, tapering 6 to 7 inches at the top, covered on all four sides with indecipherable letters, believed by some who first saw it to have been Egyptian hieroglyphics. This stone has frequently been mentioned in Pennsylvania archives. The original disappeared, as they all do,
of course, yeah,
around 1755. This is
it's
only, now check this out. This speaks to the magnitude of this. So these things were everywhere. This is only one of a great many recorded standing stones the earliest travelers and explorers found, marking the trail from the Atlantic to the Ohio by water. A trail of standing stone markers were found as far west as Lancaster, Ohio. Diaries of various early wanderers through this then wild region all faithfully testify to these standing stone markers having been there from a time before their own. List a bunch of these guys who talked about seeing these obelisks.
yeah,
David Zeisberger, Conrad Weiser, George Grogham, Heckwelder, Gist, and Peter Kalm all faithfully testify to seeing these things. So these things were everywhere, man. The standing stone. So anyway, back to what you're saying that you're finding these in Virginia, in Williamsburg, right?
yeah,
I mean, I this was some way of communicating and marking and probably
yeah,
maps for treasure and all everything else you can imagine.
yeah. So you've got the Williamsburg Bruton vault that she decoded and supposedly contains important documents. She calls it a Masonic vault. that has something to do with Francis Bacon. Um, and that's a weird one, where she was working closely with the church. She actually, by decoding all this stuff, she was able to help them find the original footprint of the early church that had been moved on the same property, but the this is in the 1920s or 30s. The original foundation had been lost, just overgrown, and it was the middle of the graveyard at that point. And she was so accurate with what she found that she was able from California to call him and be like, "Yeah, if you go look for the foundation here." Now, Williamsburg was a podunk, nothing, nobody cared about that town at that time. It was a rundown southern town, dirt road. The capital of Virginia had long since moved, like in the late 1700s, had moved to Richmond. So this was just a little Anglican church in the middle of a podunk southern town. And they find it, and then that's right when the Rockefellers swoop in and buy the whole town, and then turn it into the living museum that you can't dig on. And they never really they paid her a lot of lip service to, yeah, we'll excavate, we'll look for this vault, because they completely excavate and find the original footprint of the original church. And she says underneath that monument of the woman who, the monument says that she died at the age of 32. 32 is a very conspicuous number, being there's 32 degrees in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Um, that directly under that is where the original vault is. And they do a bunch of like sounding, they send some sounding rods down.
Hmm.
And you can actually go back and look at the archaeological report from the 1930s, and they stick these like 10-foot poles into the ground all over the place. And they did like 30 of them, and none of them did they, like, they're marked on the map, and none of them are in the spot where she said it would be. They didn't even try. And they were just like, yeah, no, we found no evidence. And then the other one is Oak Island. And I think these were, at that point, these vaults in North America, I think they were safety deposit boxes. You know what I mean? Did they hold the Ark of the Covenant and, the menorah from Solomon's temple? Maybe. Or did they just hold the vast, vast treasure that the Templars had amassed through a couple few hundred years of being the richest, order?
Hmm.
They were richer than, I mean, part of the reason the French king wanted them taken out was because he owed them so much money. And that was
Oh yeah.
a time when he had the French king had kicked out all the Spanish that were in France, because he owed the Spanish crown a bunch of money that he borrowed.
Oh yeah.
Um,
No, it was about money, and they were getting pretty powerful, and they were getting pretty rich, and they do have a lot of treasures, and they claim to have several arcs.
yeah.
Now, obviously, that's not going to be the Ark of the Covenant. I
Hmm.
don't think. Maybe I don't know, but apparently there were multiple arcs that represented some sort of an ancient type of technology. I don't know
Hmm.
exactly what that, but beyond that, I think it does represent like big chunks of treasure and manuscripts. And
Hmm.
what you see with this is something I forgot to mention earlier with the line that the Newport Tower's on that connects to the Kensington Rune Zone. That goes and connects with a place in Montana where they said they had a vault as well. So just
Oh wow.
speaking to what you're saying, this was all about putting vaults on ley lines and
Yeah.
hiding treasure. Man, that's what they were up to big time. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the Rockefellers swooped in and bought
No,
this
no, no.
this Williamsburg. They just bought the whole place, right?
They bought the whole town, kicked everybody out of their homes, and
Well, there was all this stuff over
yeah.
here, man. Like the stuff was everywhere.
And that was
If
during the time when the Rockefellers were buying the medical field. They were
mm,
buying the collegiate system. They had so much money that they were dumping all their money into the medical field to create Johns Hopkins and the new, you know, uh med school curriculum, you know, kicking out homeopathy and herb medicine and things like that for their petroleum-based prescription pharmaceutical type of medicine, which had its place, but the others had their place too. But they shaped medicine, and the medicine that we use modern day into what the Rockefellers wanted.
Yeah.
They started going around and dumping all kinds of money into all these universities, and thus they had tons of control over the curriculum. Plus, they owned the majority of the textbook manufacturing in the country, which meant they chose what went in the textbooks that they manufactured and sold. It's also at the same time that they dumped a bunch of money into the temperance movement so that prohibition would happen. Because everybody was, cars and tractors had just become invented and a thing, and they needed, and these farmers were figuring out that they could run their new farm equipment off of waste and be sustainable by taking their wasted vegetables and things on their farms, turn it into alcohol in like whiskey stills, and then run their tractors off of it. Well, the
Mm.
Rockefeller, this is a long Rockefeller. I have rants about the Rockefellers because I hate what they did to Williamsburg and the possibility of finding out some of these things by plasticizing it. But, they did this with prohibition. They had never been big non-drinkers or part of any kind of temperance movement or fighting for prohibition until their petroleum gas you know, uh, profits got cut into by industrious farmers going, "Hey, we can make our own gas." So they
Yeah. Oh
outlaw
yeah.
they dump millions into the temperance movement. We get prohibition, and then they make laws coming out, and then they help dump a bunch of money to repeal prohibition. But upon the repeal of prohibition, um, they help lobby to make a bunch of laws to where you can't have a still, um,
Sure. Yeah. Sure. But I
even
think
for personal use.
originally, I think what I'm getting at here is that they there's some reason why they wanted that land, and
Oh, one
and
100%.
and
They
it
want the
probably
knowledge,
goes.
but they don't want anybody else to have the knowledge. They want to
Yeah,
steer
there's
our
a
our
sure there's a
history.
degree of that. There's a degree of that, but yeah, what I'm finding too is that a lot of these places, I'm sure Williamsburg is probably no exception. All these towns were already there was already something there.
Hmm.
That there are major cities even in our some of our towns over here, most of them are sitting on ancient sites, and that sounds crazy, but I'm working on the research to show it all right now. I'm doing work on uncovering what was happening over here, and there were civilizations over here that we just weren't told about. And
Well,
this is
even
there's
when
there's people like Lewis and Clark were going around, and they were mapping a lot of this out, and they were reporting directly back to Washington and Jefferson.
Jefferson,
It's
and specifically Jefferson gave Meriwether Lewis, who was his personal secretary, um, uh, instructions to look for the fair-haired Native Americans out west, the
Yeah,
Mandan
exactly.
tribe.
Oh yeah.
Also, when you look at the descriptions of Powhatan's people. So our in Virginia, the Native Americans, it was a big confederation of natives in this area. But the king, they weren't called the Powhatan Indians. That's what people call them now. But it was the Mattaponi and the Chickahominy and the there's a bunch of them. But there was a big confederation of Native Americans, and Powhatan was the chief, and his kind of lineage was the chief. But when you look at the descriptions of what of even them that the early settlers talk about, they were much taller than all the other natives around. They were a much different looking people, and I think that they came specifically to Virginia into a place with a. I think they were interested in Powhatan and his people, not just to have a backwoods colony to grow tobacco on. And then when you look at the weird mythos of the John Smith Pocahontas meeting, um, and that whole meeting, her saving him from getting his head bashed in, which actually follows a specific esoteric ritual that is produced all over the world in all these different secrets. It's like a play. It's a
Hmm.
ritual where a princess saves a an initiate from being killed, kind of thing. Um, but at the same time, we know they always talk about 1607, the whole John Smith Pocahontas, epoch as being the start and the first thing. There was a Jesuit mission in the exact piece of land that William and Mary, the college that I researched, there was a Jesuit mission right there a few decades before it.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Um,
saying.
and then when you look at Oak Island, a site of another one of these vaults,
Well,
you
the
have.
Jesuits they would have put that there for a particular reason, and if it's anything like what they were doing out in Phoenix and out west, they were going out and establishing places right next to older
Mhm.
the ruins that a lot of which housed caves and a sarcophagus of
Yeah,
older people. Some of them were really big too, like giants.
yeah,
I've got some accounts like that where the Jesuits were over here snooping around and all that stuff, looking for giants, looking for ancient civilizations. And, so anyway, all that to say, I think they probably put their mission there for a reason. It was
yeah.
already
Well,
a town there.
and then when you get that first 1607 mission that comes over, the kind of commander of that mission on the trip over here with John Smith was a guy named Sir Gabriel Archer, who, when you go back and look at history now, his parents were crypto Catholics. They found his grave in 2010, and he was facing the opposite way, which usually represents in Christendom that you're the preacher. That either you're so bad that you don't get to be buried in the same direction. I can't remember. You're supposed to rise to the sun setting or the sunrise, whatever the tradition is. He was buried the opposite way, which means you're either a real bad guy or you're a preacher.
Hmm.
And that way you rise facing your congregation. So they rise all together, you rise, right? But they also found he was buried with his spear, and he was buried with a little lead reliquary on his chest. And they've x-rayed the reliquary, and it contains pieces of parchment, pieces of human bone, and little ampules with liquid in it. So you're looking at a Catholic burial of with a reliquary in it with bones of a saint, holy water. So he's buried with full Catholic honors in Jamestown. Now this is during a time when you get hanged for being a Catholic. And not only is he buried with, so everybody there knew that he was a Catholic. He the spot that William and Mary sits on is at the end of this creek that is now called College Creek. But he, in particular, was so adamant that it be put, that the fort, James Fort, actually be put there, that they forever called that creek Archer's Hope after him. And that just so happened to be the exact place where the Jesuits had been decades before. But he's not supposed to be a Catholic. Nobody's supposed to be a Catholic in England anymore. And then when you look at Oak Island, you have the exact same thing happening. You've got French Catholics up there, and then you immediately have the guys from Jamestown going up there to boot the French Catholics out, and it goes back and forth and back and forth. So even
Hmm.
within our own history, we have this kind of timeline of this is when Jamestown started, this is when Virginia started. And that's not, I mean, you don't even have to dig very, very far to go, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's not accurate. No, no,
Eh,
most of that's inaccurate. And you've got letters to Thomas Jefferson talking about how the landscape in America in the early 1800s still was dotted with forts and star forts.
Yeah,
They thought that there was upwards to 5,000 of these, some of which enclosed 100 acres. And what was happening was This was a landscape that had been settled by people far, far long ago,
Yeah.
far greater than we're being told. And the natives were moving into the star forts, though, in those enclosures. And in fact, those letters with Jefferson, it references that there was another group here in addition to the natives, right? So
Hmm.
there's several things happening over here that we just have no clue about. It's not in the history books, but in the group that was here in addition to the natives, it mentions that their population appears to have been diminished over time.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to the 1800s, they're almost all gone, and that's why Lewis and Clark didn't have the easiest time finding the so-called white Indians. There were still
Yeah.
some around, but they weren't as prevalent
Yeah,
as the Indians.
there were more anomalies, and I think that's simply just it's just like the people of Roanoke Island. At a certain point, they didn't think they were coming back for him, and they wrote a note and said, "Hey, we're with the Croatan Indians." It said Croatan, and
Right,
they've
exactly.
treated it as this mystery. And then they just bred out. You know,
Right. They moved. They just moved.
yeah,
Yeah.
the dominant genes take over, and you all start to look like one another. I mean, because you have the whole, you've also got that great story of like King Arthur's son or the descendant of King Arthur, Prince Madoc, I think it was,
Oh yeah, the
who,
Welsh,
yeah,
Welsh.
yeah, came up through the Bay of Mobile. You've got that site in the National Forest there in northeast Alabama that where there's a big rock wall built, who all the natives forever have always said, yeah, we didn't build that. Some white people built that.
Where was
But
it? What is it?
so up the Mississippi, somewhere in the northeast of Alabama, there's like a cliffy, hilly area.
Okay.
And there's like a cliff up high, and then there's a cave on top of that cliff. And then around the outskirts of that cave is this like handmade built like rock wall. It's like
Yeah. Okay.
a mortar like rock
Couple
wall.
of those.
And
Couple
ever
of those
since,
around.
yeah, and but ever since the beginning of settlers coming here and being like, yeah, that's a nice rock wall, Native American. And the Native Americans are like, no,
No,
that's
we
not ours,
didn't.
man. Some white people built that shit like a long
Oh
time ago.
yeah.
It's been
I
here.
mean,
And if
yeah.
you follow the Mississippi, it's up the Mississippi where all these mound cultures,
Right.
end up.
Well,
And
you get to Cahokia, and that's also mentioned in this. It's a letter. Somebody sent me this great video on this. It's this guy Analog, and he pulls out this letter to Thomas Jefferson from the American Philosophical Society, because
hmm
if you go into the Cosmos Club and how
hmm
they perpetrated this cover up, they got all the big clubs in America together in one room. Uh, you know, Smithsonian, Bureau of Ethnology, American Philosophical Society, American Shakespeare Society, all the societies were all under one room, and they got them all on board and got them all tracking with the same narrative.
hmm
But so anyway, but also in this letter that this to Thomas Jefferson about this stuff, it talks about Cahokia, further up the Mississippi, like you're saying. And it talks about how there were cities opposite of Cahokia on either side, which is what I've been telling people for a long time, because St. Louis was on one of them. People don't realize how vast that and populated that area was. It
hmm
wasn't just Cahokia proper, like it spread out. There were multiple cities there in the St.
hmm
Louis area. St. Louis is on top of one of them. And but they also talk about New Madrid, which is an old town on the Mississippi there. Huge curve in the river.
hmm
And it's the kind of one of the places I was identifying. It was on my list as an ancient potential place for ancient ruins or for star forts, because of the geography of it. You can look at the map, and if it's the Ohio or if it's the Mississippi, you can look at certain geographical signs, geological signs even, and you can tell where they would have put things. And this was one of
Right.
them, and it mentions it in the letter. I thought that was interesting. New Madrid, old town. They just put the town on top of something much older, the ruins and
Yeah.
everything.
Well, even Richmond, Virginia is sits on seven hills that
Yeah.
they speculate were mounds. And I mean,
Well,
they did that in
but you got,
Philadelphia.
yeah, all the cities, and you got Thomas Jefferson aware of this, like I said before, I think Washington was as well. And it plays directly into why they put our American towns and cities where they did. There's way more to it. And we're
Yeah.
just now starting to figure out that this was even a thing. So we don't have all the answers, but there's way more to it. They knew way more about the land here than we realize. And
Well, and look at the
ancient, they were working with ancient everything, ways of doing things
yeah,
like
different ways of,
geomancy and
yeah, different ways of doing things, different knowledge, different books that we'll never find again.
mhm.
I mean, look at the early jobs of both Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. They both were surveyors,
Right, exactly. It
trained at
all
William and
checks
Mary.
out. It all checks
They
out.
spent so much time just out in the wilderness surveying, which it's an easy cover to say, yeah, we're surveying, new property so we can steal it all. But
They knew about the ruins. This goes far beyond mounds. There's
mhm,
way more going on than just mound sites. They put the towns on mound sites too. Don't get me wrong, but there was a lot more going on over here. In fact, I think the architects of some of this goes back to the Middle East and a core group of what was called magi
yeah,
architects, like wizard architects that came over here. And in fact, in some of the old material that I've looked through, you'll see these interesting terms and phrases in there, like the cities were ascribed to a group of wandering masons.
right, yeah,
That's from an old article. Then you get into the Roger Kennedy stuff, and he says that there was trade networks extending from the Carolinas all the way into Yellowstone that was put in place and populated and cities put on there that he attributed to a class of priest, astronomer, geomancer, architects. And then you get into the Templar letters, and they talk about how there was a group of Templars looking for a free Templar state. There's
right,
all this indication that these people were over here, doing geomancy and city planning, if you will. It all
yeah,
ties together. It's totally not a coincidence that Washington and Jefferson were surveyors. That plays right into this.
yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. Do you put any stock into the idea of the possibility of the lost tribe making it
Oh
over
yeah,
here? Yeah.
oh yeah,
Having
yeah. I
their
think so.
having their um their proximity to the Phoenicians, the seafaring Canaanite tribe.
Hmm.
I find that to be interesting because you find things that seem Phoenician in nature over here, and then you find all this Hebrew inexplicably
Well, that's what I was
over
going to
here as well. Yeah,
jump in and say a minute ago. Was talking about these rock walls. I covered one on my show. It's called the Chautauqua Wall. They found it in Tennessee. It's still there. It's buried. It got so out of hand that the guy who owns the farm out there reburied the wall, but it's got Hebrew on it.
no shit.
Yeah, it's got Hebrew on it, and I got all these old articles about it and everything. They brought in a guy from New York, a professor. He came down, and the first night he's having dinner with the guy who owns the farm, and they pulled out these pieces of the wall to show him, and immediately he's transcribing it. He's like, "Oh, that's Hebrew. I can tell you what it says right here, right now."
Wow.
And that's so that we've got that. You've got the rock wall out in Texas that's contested. There's one in Montana as well that looks like a giant rock wall. But yeah, speaking to the Hebrews being over here and other people, that's the thing. And some of the language that we're finding on artifacts here, that aren't being talked about are not just Hebrew, but Semitic in nature. So
Yeah.
some of it might be Phoenician too.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I really do. And yeah, you mentioned the Mandan tribe.
Yeah.
Um, they they said they were telling settlers. Yeah, I think it was George Catlin. He went in and spent a lot of time with the Mandan, and they had like eschatology, like they were. waiting
Yeah.
for things to happen in the Middle East, and they said they were going to hop on a boat and go over to the Middle East. And once they got to the shores of Israel, they were going to drop the first letter of their name. They were going to go from the Mandan to the Dans because
Really?
they believed themselves to be the tribe of Dan.
No kidding.
Yeah, bro. That's how deep this goes.
Yeah, dude, it's I hate to
They
be
spoke
so
Welsh. They spoke Welsh too. There's
yeah.
people
Yeah,
got to
that's
factor
I've seen
in.
the language comparison of the my dearly departed mother-in-law was Welsh, came from she was sweet little Welsh lady. We talked about this a couple times and she couldn't she- very mainstream type lady but couldn't believe and I remember pulling up the little YouTube video where somebody was comparing all these words that these mound adjacent tribes, these Mississippi tribes, all the words that they shared identical to old Welsh words. And to sit next to somebody from Wales, because I don't know if you've ever read a Welsh word. I mean, they are it's actually kind of interesting because they spell things kind of similar to Middle Eastern. Lots of consonants, um, very few. It seems Semitic, um, just going from the Levant to Wales, and not even talking about it coming over here, but just the Welsh language. Like early Hebrew, like they didn't have any vowels. It was all consonants. And when you look at a Welsh word, I mean, I think the longest word like that exists is a Welsh town, and it's like 30 letters, and there's like four vowels in the whole thing. It's all D's and W's and Y's and stuff. And then I show her this video, and it's you know, guys comparing this Native American language from America, and she was like, "There's no way."
Hmm.
She was like, "There's no way. These words are so unique, even to
Right.
Welsh people. They're so unique that they can't be." She couldn't fathom how some Native American tribe could just accidentally create their own language that was so close,
Well,
meaning the same thing. And it's stuff like,
yeah, well, that's documented too. That's documented that people came over here and they were Welsh
mm,
and they were speaking Welsh, and the Native Americans knew what they were saying. They had conversations. The languages were still close enough to where they could still communicate with each other
yeah,
in Welsh. And like one of the things George Catlin said about the Mandan tribe was that they were an amalgamation of white and native. So this is
right.
something that married into. These are two groups that married into each other. And was that did the tribe of Dan come in through the Welsh people? Is that where that came from? I don't
Yeah.
know.
And
But
then you've got, I mean, look at Albert Pike after the war. He became the big Native American kind of ambassador. Like he spent tons of time with the natives out west. He was obsessed with, and I think it's
there was
just
a free
regain
there was
knowledge.
Freemasonry.
Yeah,
That just like some of the
yeah,
Welsh languages was being held, there was Freemason
yeah.
principles and symbols being used by the natives too. That's
Well,
another mystery.
that was what was intimated about the Pocahontas thing, is that it really closely resembled like esoteric initiation, um
Yeah. Well,
mystery
the
school
natives,
initiation.
right? The natives had secret societies,
Yeah.
and the Masons started picking up on it. And what some of the Masons were doing back in the 1800s was going out collecting native art that already had Masonic symbols on it because they thought that it was interesting. And it's been
Mm,
like this big mystery. But at some point, what you had was tribes like the Mandan, the Micmac, the Cherokee. They had these inner Masonic like secret societies, and the Dakota. The Dakota even had a term called Camp Burney, which means as it is above, so it is below.
hmm.
So it's like the Dakota went to Egyptian mystery schools. What? How did this?
Right.
Where did that come from? And that's we were talking about Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism earlier. Those draw heavily from the Egyptian mystery schools. So
Right.
how did they end up in the hands of the Dakota? And if you look at the Mandans again, who by their own admission said that they believed themselves to be the tribe of Dan, they were practicing a mix of Druidism and Christianity. It was like they had sort of
Yeah.
morphed into, um, and they were speaking these Welsh words. So it's obviously can be assumed that somewhere along the line they had connections with the Welsh, but it all goes back to I think older societies. I think I can show you some of the Druid societies that Queen Elizabeth was a part of. They're very old, but Freemasonry, because it's big in that part of the world, in Wales and Scotland,
Hmm.
somehow made its way into I think the Druids stuff, and then somehow it integrated into the however these natives got a hold of Masonic stuff.
Yeah.
It's Druidism. It's just a big blend of things that's been passed down over the years
And
and
that's, I mean, that's
carried back and
masonry.
forth.
It's an amalgamation of mysteries from mystery schools from, it didn't matter. It was Egypt, French paganism, early, Solomonic magic. I mean, it just goes to show. I mean, it's what the Templars had certain, the guys who created the Templars, they had certain knowledge because they were rich aristocrats from France that were steeped in some of this esoteric knowledge just being in France. And then when they got the opportunity to go to the Holy Land, I mean, I think they were looking for things specifically. I think they were looking to add to their knowledge when they went over there. And that's why they spent so much time digging um, where Solomon's temple was. I think it's why there was this. Was that you or me? It wasn't
I don't
saying.
know. I didn't hear anything.
Okay. Um, but that's there's a really weird relationship between the Templars and the Assassin. This
Yeah,
freaking Muslim kill squad. They're in the middle of the they're in the
the
middle.
Hashish.
Yeah, which is where the word assassin comes from. They think it might come from hashish, assassin, but at that point they were being called the assassin. Have you ever heard that story about the crazy warlord who had these assassins and he would drug them and have them brought up to his? He had this somewhere in like Afghanistan or something. He had this mountain fortress, right? That nobody knew how to get to it. And he would have these young dudes like he would have them drugged and then they would wake up like in front of him in his like mountain palace.
That
And
sounds like it's in that movie Batman too.
well, it's kind of like that, but it was a little it was a little more it was a little more effective because they would wake up somewhere where they didn't know where they were, and then
Which
they
which Batman movie was that, bro?
that's Ra's al Ghul's
Ra's
spot
al
up
Ghul.
in
Thank you.
up in yeah. But this guy he would drug them or he would bring them up there and then he would drug them while they were there and then they would drag them out. They had this whole complex on the property up in the mountains and they had all these hot girls, right? These
Oh,
young hot girls, and they even had supposedly they had built like dug troughs into the landscape and it was like the hanging gardens of Babylon, just this beautiful paradise looking place up on this mountain, and they had
mm-hmm.
troughs dug into the scenery and they would pump milk and honey through them. So these Muslim guys would they'd go see this warlord guy, and then all of a sudden they'd just wake up out of nowhere in paradise. And then for a couple of days, these chicks would attend to their every need. And then eventually they'd get drugged again and wake up back in front of the warlord. And he'd be like, I'm such a godly man, and Allah loves me so much that I'm able to give you a taste of paradise, and that's what just happened. And it was so convincing that there's all these stories about guys who would reach for the closest guard's like knife or dagger to try to cut his own throat because he wanted to go back so much. And
Mm,
basically that's how they created the SS scene was he would trick these guys into like give them so much zeal because he just showed them paradise. He just proved their faith to them and they'd be like, "All right, but here's the deal.
dude. Yeah, that sounds
All
like
you all you
just
got to
Batman.
do yeah." And then he'd say
Batman
all you got to do
Begins.
now is you got to kill who we tell you to kill. And
Right.
then and he was doing it, I mean, I think mostly just for money. I mean, because then they became the people that you would go to take out whoever. But
Yeah.
long
That's
story,
League of Shadows.
yeah. But they became close with a lot of the Templars.
Hmm.
It's so much so that there are stories of, you know, a pitched battle with Crusaders against Saracens, and then all of a sudden the Crusaders see the Templars ride in and they're like, "Ah, we're saved." But this Templar unit turns on them and just starts fighting the Christians alongside
Mm,
the Muslims and vice
mm,
versa. That you
right.
know the Templars would be in some pitched battle with their other Crusader army and they'd see this Muslim army come flank them out of nowhere and they're like, "Oh, we're all dead." And the Templars are like, "No, no, don't worry about it. Those are that's our dudes. They're coming to
Mm.
help." And everybody like there's a bunch of stories like that
Yeah,
from the Crusades.
that's what I was kind of getting at earlier with that with the Templars integrating with some of these secret
Yeah.
societies from the Middle East, like the Druze and the Turkish Freemason groups and etc. There was another one that you brought up. There's a couple of these groups that are they're Middle Eastern secret societies. They go way back, and they were friends. They had a working relationship with the Templars, as did the Cistercians and the Tyrannicians. They all got along. This was all a big mystery school barbecue for
Yeah,
them.
yeah, that's my point. Is none of this has anything to do with the official story. The official story is we were Christians, we loved the Pope and Jesus, and we were going over there to take the Holy Land back. Well, yeah, the proletariat, that the fodder, that's what they were doing. That's why they thought they were there. The guys with knowledge, the guys who had these vast libraries and these castles who created the template, they were over there for a different reason. They were over there to gain more esoteric knowledge.
Oh
And I
yeah,
don't think it's as simple as they just showed up there, stumbled on something and like, "Oh, we're going to do this now." I think they knew. I mean, when you look at the Templars formed from um nine French noble second sons. I mean, they call them the poor Knights of Christ, but they weren't poor when they started. They were the ultra rich of southern France. They weren't going to inherit any titles, and those specific nine guys. I mean, they were there for a different reason.
yeah. The esoteric knowledge is what again they were bonding over that and initiating each other and sharing trade secrets, Masonic trade secrets even. But it was the esoteric knowledge that was running the show over here in America for the longest time before it was ever
Yeah.
called America. So when the founding fathers come along and name it America, that was an operation, I believe, what I'm starting to see is it was an operation taken from existing examples of societies with esoteric knowledge. They built
Yeah.
the cities on the older cities. I think they were using some of the techniques they saw that were already here and incorporating that, like buildings, emulating building styles, and
Yeah.
they were basing the government off of existing tenets. That how did the Native Americans have these tenets? I don't
Yeah, look
know,
at the
but
Iroquois and the Powhatan, or the
well, that's the
Iroquois and the
thing.
Algonquin confederations. They were much
It's the
closer.
Constitution.
Yeah, they were
It's the Constitution.
much closer to a much closer to a democracy than anything that they had experienced in Europe,
The
which I find kind
Constitution
of interesting.
was possibly comprised by the Iroquois rules.
Well, so you know
And they
too
were the
that
people of the longhouse. Iroquois means people of the longhouse. They were building longhouses. That's very Viking,
yeah, yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah. We had
This
them here
is
too. We had wigwams, which are just big, long Viking looking houses. That's what the Powhatan Indians lived in, were long long houses. Another interesting thing, I don't know if you know this, but there is a famous, I just read this recently that the Scottish claim that they come from um, a Egyptian princess. It was an Egyptian princess who ran away with a who's the badass early steppe tribe, uh not the Assyrians, the guys that wore the scalloped armor. God, I can't believe I can't remember their name. Anyway, came over. That's what the Bruces were proponents of this kind of origin story of the Scottish, that they came from Egyptian. So in the like 1400s, that was the Scottish origin story, is that they started from and her name was Skoda. She was a princess of a pharaoh. She was the daughter of a pharaoh who somehow had to escape and made it to first Ireland and then to Scotland, and that's what Scotland is named after.
Yeah.
And
So some of those mummies,
so far that the Scottish kind of Declaration of Independence, which is the proclamation of Armagh or something like that, actually states, oh, Scythian, that's what she was. She was
yeah,
it, they come from
Scythian
Scottish,
princess.
they come from an Egyptian princess, and a Scythian, her Scythian husband is the beginning of Scotland. And that story is stated in that Scottish Declaration. Funny enough, Thomas Jefferson used that proclamation as his inspiration for the Declaration of Independence. Also
Say that
funny
again.
enough, so back when Braveheart days, Robert the Bruce is fighting back and forth with the English, trying to get the English out of Scotland and gain their independence. He puts out the Bruce family, Robert the Bruce puts out um this proclamation or declaration of, it's called like Armagh or Barma or something like that. And it is the direct inspiration that Thomas Jefferson used for our Declaration of Independence. And the crazy thing is that when and in that declaration that Robert the Bruce made, he cites Scotland's supposed origins as being from this Princess Skoda of
Hmm.
Egypt and this Scythian dude, right? This is around the exact same time. This is around the exact same time that the Templars help the Scottish in their final battle against the English, or the supposed, it's the Battle of Bannoncock or something like that.
Hmm.
And it was the Scottish were outnumbered, and the English thought they were going to roll right over them, and then all of a sudden this this cavalry unit from out of nowhere flanks the English, and they're flying a red cross on a white field. And so
Okay,
that's where,
so the Egyptian princess. So you this might go back to the Hyksos dynasty. There were Semitic pharaohs in Egypt. If
I'm
funny
not
enough,
sure.
guess what they helped develop?
What's that?
Early democracy.
Huh.
And they would later have descendants who were Templars. So all that's connected.
Yeah, I just
And
find
it's
it so
connected with the
interesting that our
Scythians.
declaration goes back to inspiration from the Scottish kind of declaration,
Yeah.
a few hundred years before, and that just so happens to contain the story of a Egyptian princess, and it just so happens to take place at a time in Scottish history when supposedly the Knights Templar are hiding there, and they help Scotland gain their independence in this decisive battle. And then Scottish Rite of Freemasonry comes later, and it's just filled with, Egyptian symbolism.
Yeah,
It's
the Druids were Scythian royalty as well.
Yeah, and the
There
Scythians
was
came. Yeah,
links to the Huns. the
Yeah. Yep.
Hungarian and the Merovingians, also the Albigensian Cathars, which that
Yeah.
gets in southern France and the country of Toulouse. That who they use that red cross on a shield. So this goes back to Scythians.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were a nomadic warrior, warrior nomads.
Yeah.
And I mean, their Scythian influence, they say in the early Gaul, um, in France there. And that's where those, they say that the Scythians, it went from the Sidonians to the Phoenicians, which bled into the Scythians, and then the Scythians bled into the northern French Gaul area and influenced those French pagan tribes. And again, you go through all those that I just said, and they all have goddess, if we can bring it around to the beginning, they
Yeah.
all have this extreme goddess worship. And when
They
you
had
follow it all the way back, you follow it back to the Sidonians who were worshiping Baal on one hand and this Queen of Heaven on the other hand.
Yeah,
And
it's in a part of that too. With some of the cultures, you had the fairy lore, the elves,
yeah,
and all that. The Tuatha De Danann that comes out of a Scythian bloodline, a Scythian dragon uh, society,
did you
and
buy that book yet?
you have what's no, I haven't got it yet, but
Gotta get
we'll
it,
talk
man.
about it afterwards. But you have what's called the Elven Blood Royale that
Right.
comes out of the 1700s AD in Angiers. That's also Scythian. And according to historians, uh, many of them were blonde hair with blue eyes. The the Tuatha De Danann that comes from the Black Sea is what they're saying, and it's the sons of Noah, lineage of the sons of Noah.
Right.
So, and then the Pendragon, that's Welsh. The Welsh thing that we've been talking about this whole
Yeah.
episode is, I think, very much connected to this.
Yeah, I think
Scythians
so too.
and the Hyksos. The Hyksos, again, were they were these Semitic people that became a royal bloodline in Egypt and became produced pharaohs and all this. But Pendragon was Welsh for chief of the dragons, so you
Right.
get the dragon bloodline in the mix with all this. These people had this secret society. We've talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Uther Pendragon,
Yep.
that was King Arthur's father, and so he's a part of the bloodline. And they were said to have unicorns, like they actually had unicorns as
Yeah.
pets or something. And
Supposedly where that comes from.
yeah, and the unicorns is often associated with the Nephilim as well. So you got dragons, Nephilim, you know, uh, dragon court secret societies. It's all Tuatha De Danann, goddesses, elves, fairies. It's all in the pot, man. And,
Yeah.
and they found the ice princess, the Scythian ice princess, incredibly preserved mummies, one of the world's most preserved mummies. And she's got tattoos, and she's
Yeah, I
got
see that.
griffin tattoos.
Yeah.
The griffin is on all their family crests and stuff, and it's a griffin is like this chimeric creature that's closely related to the dragons. So this is
They
all
just put a
this
Griffin
the
statue in
gr-
the middle of the campus of William and Mary. They've got Griffin
Griffin goes back
statues,
to
phoenixes.
it goes back to the Welsh in Ireland too. Like those families, the Griffin wielding families with it on their crest. You can find those people in Wales and Ireland,
Yeah.
and it's all the descendants of the dragon, the Scythian dragons, and I think the Hyksos are a part of that too. Druids and all that. This it's one big. You could tie it all together.
Yep. Well, I think that might be a good place to wrap it up, man.
Yeah,
Tie it all
yeah, for
together
sure.
with some griffins and some dragons, man. We
Yeah,
gotta
bro.
we gotta talk about that book. But man,
Okay.
tell everybody where they can find you, and we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for being our
Every
first one back after 4 months.
Oh, cool. I
You're
was
the first one. You're the first one in the new studio.
love it, man. Love it. Studio looks good. Looks what do the girls say?
It's
I don't put
comfy.
like cozy. Is that what I hear the girls say?
I
It kind
call
of
it
looks.
I call it creepy cozy.
Creepy
Yeah, dude,
cozy.
I got some weird stuff in here, man. This is an Oddfellows jacket for, circa um 1870. There's an Knights of Catan. I got into this thing where I started buying up all this old weird secret society like from the turn of the century. So I've got all this stuff. You can't see it, but over in that corner, I have a full red velvet ceremonial Oddfellows robe from like
Okay.
1850s or 60s. Some weird stuff. I got an Order of the Skull and Crescent paddle from Purdue University over there. I wish you could see it better because it was kind of the whole
Yeah.
point. I'm gonna have to get some better cameras, I think, so you can
No,
see
that's
my
cool,
weird
man.
shit. But yeah. Anyway, so yeah, tell
Yeah.
them where you're at.
Okay. Yeah. You can find me over at the Six Sensory Podcast. Rather than using the number six, I do indeed spell it out SIX. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. If you want bonus content, I have a Patreon, drop a bonus episode every week over there. I also have an Instagram, but the best place to find me is Spotify. So yeah, Six Sensory Podcast, come check it out.
Yeah,
Always good to talk with you, Ernie.
absolutely. Go check him out because he usually does interviews with smarter folks than me, and they don't interrupt him quite as much and go off on tangents. So I listen to it a lot nowadays. Have hit that sweet spot of I've got like 25 podcasts on rotation, and I swear the last year I don't want to none of the topics people are talking about. They've gotten away from everything, but you just hit like all the different pieces that I love. And I
Oh,
swear
cool.
it's like every episode I'm like, shit, yeah, yes, another one. So yeah, go check them out, guys. And thanks for listening. I'll have this one up on YouTube and whatnot. And we'll be back next week. I think I've got John Brisson from We've Read the Documents. And he's got another one. I can't remember the name of it. And then we've got Robert Frederick, our old Bacon, Francis Bacon expert coming on. We've got Daniel J. Duke, the real great grandson of Jesse James, is booked. And also William Ramsey is coming back on to talk about something. And then I'll be on Tinfoil Hat on April 8th. So check that out. All right, guys, have a great night and insert your own catchphrase. Bye.